Firstly, I have avoided all the spoilers in this review, minus in the bad that alludes to Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, and will mention observations that have been released by Warhorse Studio trailers. I haven't finished the main quest yet. Let's talk about the positives first. The animations. The animation is amazing. During the dialogue, it is very clear if someone is supporting and disagreeing with your choices through subtle facial expressions, allowing the player to temper up or down depending on their roleplay. The AI, leaving door open on a crime spree, raises suspicions from NPC, and the guards will actively respond to your report of theft. Also, walking around with stolen items isn't wise. This could be a whole another topic of its own. The dialogue. Like Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, which I will call KCD for brevity, a game with voiced protagonist can either be amazing or terrible. Looking at, like, for an example, Fallout 4. For example, 90% of the time, given the option to select dialogue, the option I like would be there in this game. The quest. During the main story, I get massively sidetracked, as a villager would ask for help, which would lead to further and further sidetracking. More ways to complete the quest, like KCD 1, where you could complete quest through several ways. In KCD 2, they expanded that massively. The combat seemed to be a lot smoother, and like KCD 1, the more the time I invest in Henry, the better he gets. It just seems much more refined. Further on the dialogue, unlike KCD 1, where an NPC would mostly say look up the crossroads, KCD 2 gives more detail to where to find them, so skipping dialogue can hinder Henry. Also, villagers would ask you how you doing, which is a nice touch. The graphics and the soundtrack is just beautiful. Inventory, being able to change from handsome Henry to warrior Henry in just 2 clicks on PC is a gift. Let's talk about the bad for an example this far. Some of my smaller criticism is that I would much prefer the dialogue options where Henry could go the way of his father and not become a mini Sir Hans. Instead of, my pa was a blacksmith and he made a mighty sword. In terms of bugs, so far I had 2 bugs that I crashed, but overall it's a minor inconvenience. It's nothing. It is one of the most polished games I've seen released this year. I've seen others say that the horse riding seems worse in this game. Not having to hold the button to keep galloping is counterintuitive, and the way the riding feels is just different. It feels like the horse is fighting against you slightly, and when it didn't feel like that way in the first game. Too many long stretches of story with no options to explore. I guess I get why they had to do this for narrative purposes. But damn, there's some long stretches where it's just cutscenes and following other characters on a horseback with really nothing to break up the monotony. The reviewers also saying that there are no glitches or bugs, but I encountered quite a few. Random flashing light here and there, characters walking through walls, etc. The NPC behaviors makes no sense sometimes. For example, there was a night camp in the wood, and we had a conversation where I agreed to help him with something, and then as soon as the conversation was over, he suddenly got mad that I was in the camp and we had to fight to the death, ending the quest before it really even started. There is no skill elements when it comes to alchemy. I wish there were higher skill caps. For example, you can make 4 potions by just following the recipe, which doesn't quite makes much sense. I wish there were more in-depth in hunting and survival. We are butchering animals on the ground. I wish we could set up some small camps with racks and maybe a bedroll, carry field dressed throughout carcasses. Can't enter the churches, which is a bit of a bummer because they were one of the more fanciful places. Not to mention some of them are preserved to this day. I hope the DLC fixes this. The forced stealth section can be bad if you don't put anything on stealth. The mission The Storm was one of the worst missions I played in a long time. I loved the game, but I think the biggest issue for me is that there is no gear progression past the point of getting to Gutenberg. I wish there were more to it than spend 5k grossens on the items and now you will never have to find anything better ever again. Especially since the main quest leading up to Gutenberg gives you a massive wealth with how many geared soldiers you are killing during those quests. I had 15k gross ben when I made it to Gutenberg. I just bought the best in slot items despite only being halfway through the game. The character progression just stops there gear wise, and that is very off-putting for me. I always enjoy having something to look forward to in an RPG, and now I really don't have much except the perks, which I feel like could have been more of a character progression on top of it. The ending feels like it just stops with no real conclusion. If you pick up Start a Family, you lose the sword post game, so what's the point in that? Romance was also weak as hell with no real payoff, with just super lackluster. The stealth quest in the Storm quest was awful. Stealth section sucked in KCD 1, and it's not much better here. The post game feels like completely dead. At least in KCD 1, you could at least talk to an NPC for a bit, give gift to romance options, stuff like that. This game, none of that, just empty. The blacksmithing needs work. Instead of forcing recipes with set materials, wish we could mix and match steel, guard, panel, whatever to make it unique weapons. Scope of some of the voice acting is just bad, and they reuse voices way too much. Most bandits sound like Fritz. Beard Captain Bernard's voice multiple times, and I wish Ishvan's voice was reused in one of the leaders in Sigismund camp. The economy is still busted. By mid-game, you don't even need to grind for gears. The economy is still busted. By mid-game, you don't even need to grind for gears. You're just stacking in money. too easy to fill up your horses with 50 pieces of armor and make a bank in Gutenberg. Would have been way better if the economy was actually a challenge. Honestly, the biggest issue for me is that the storylines don't really get a conclusion. Eric is still out there. Romance from KDC 1 and KDC 2 lack any ending. What's next for Hans? So much shit still needs to be wrapping up. I am hoping they fix it with DLC or maybe even KCD 3. I love the game, but I have many complaints. Like blacksmithing and alchemy needs to be fleshed out more. There should be a quest or a series of quests in which order to be considered to proper blacksmithing, and same for alchemy. I really enjoyed the challenge of learning to read in the first game. I wish there was some sort of challenge for reading books you had to overcome in the second. I was hoping they would improve the combat in the second game, but it feels watered down instead. Early game, everything one hits you, and in the late game you one shot everyone. There needs to be more skill expressions. Overall, the progression is good. I am not complaining that in the early game it is too hard, in the late game it is too easy. That could be a rewarding as well. I'm just hoping there's a bit more of a challenge in the late game. That's all. And the opening should be a little bit more welcoming. Even in the game like Gothic, which this game takes inspiration from, there are some opening sections. Overall, this is one of the best games ever made. One of the best games that come out in 2025, and it is a strong challenger for Game of the Year. Let's see what GTA 6 does come out in this year or not. Even if it come out, I hope that this game does, the KDC 2 does get some of the nominations and some recognition in Game of the Year award, because this game really does deserve it. The developers, Warhorse developers, really put a lot of effort into this game, and it really shows. I hope that it hits its stride and have a great sales figures, and I hope there is a third game for this series, because the main storyline in this game really feels like it is setting up for the third game. It really feels like it is bridging the gap between the two games. I hope there is another sequel for this game which really takes all the good aspects from first two games and brings it home all together with a great resolutions for all the main quest lines. And I hope that Warhorse Studio continues to improve and increase their fan base, both critically and financially. That's it for today's video. Thanks for watching.